Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the TFA EPL Podcast. We are the Thinking Fans Podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties, who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. We're sponsored by the EPL Prospectus, a 280-page guide of the upcoming season created by a team of 25-plus writers and designers. Moneyball for football, analytics plus eye candy. Available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Today, we're joined by soccer analyst Harshal Patel. Also on the pod is Dre Fortune, a professional creative attacking midfielder from North Carolina FC. I'm host Chris Mumford, known as the Professor. Bella ciao. During week 7, we had an abnormal week in that everything went, well, kind of normal. English clubs did well in Europe this last week. They went 5-1. Scoring 17 goals and only 1 goal given up. Tottenham was the outside man with respect to the winners. And also on the weekend, 5 out of the big 6 won, with the lone exception of relegation-threatened Manchester United. Today, we're going to talk a bit about the Champions League, and then we're going to review the Arsenal-Man United and other matches that caught our attention this weekend. We'll also preview Man United-Everton, Man City, Liverpool. But before we do that, we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming Liverpool-Atalanta match in the Champions League. Harshal, why don't we go ahead and get started with that match that you were most interested in talking about, which is the Man United and Arsenal game. Help us unpack that.
Yeah, and it's so with respect to that game, I think it's also important to look at the previous United game during the week, which was against RB Leipzig in the Champions League. And it's interesting that United used the same formation in both games, at least from the start, which was Solskjaer basically put out midfield diamond, and it worked quite differently in both games. Obviously, United won 5-0 during the midweek and lost 1-0 on the weekend against Arsenal. And there were a few sort of differences in the way it was used, and also differences in how the opposition played it. So against Leipzig, for example, in the midfield that started was Nemanja Matic holding. You had Pogba and Fred as the two sort of flankers in that diamond, and Donny van de Beek actually started at the tip of the diamond with Bruno Fernandes on the bench. And what was interesting about that is in the first half, actually, Leipzig had a lot of the ball, but they didn't really penetrate, or they couldn't penetrate, because what happens is when you play a diamond is you naturally create it naturally lends itself to not allowing the opposition to be able to pass through the center, and United did that really well. They contracted the space centrally, so Leipzig were forced to play the ball out wide. They couldn't really get it into those dangerous central areas, which they can do, but they couldn't do that. And Pogba had a really good game. He set up the opening goal for Greenwood with a brilliant pass, which is what he was sort of in the squad to do, to make those kind of passes. And then I thought Solskjaer got his substitutions absolutely spot on. He brought Fernandes, Rashford, and a bunch of others on in the second half towards the sort of hour mark. And then they were just able to tear Leipzig apart on the counter-attack as they pushed forward. So that's worked out really well in that game. But in the weekend game against Arsenal, he changed things around. Scott McTominay came in instead of Matic, and Fernandes came in instead of Van de Beek. And also another important change was the fact that Martial was suspended for the Premier League. So although Anthony Martial and Rashford started up front against Leipzig, it was Greenwood and Rashford who started up front against Arsenal. And that was important because, again, in a midfield diamond, when you're playing with two strikers, you need to be able to have those strikers hold up the ball, because you don't really have too much offensive threat going down the wings, because you don't have wide players. Your fullbacks need to provide the width. So while they get up the pitch, when there's a counter attack or when you get the ball, your strikers need to be able to hold up the ball. And neither Greenwood nor Rashford are that good at doing that. And Martial is actually quite good. He did that really well against Leipzig. So whenever United were able to, on the few occasions, get away from the Arsenal press, they weren't able to hold up the ball. And at the same time, Arsenal pressed really well. They'd done their homework. They targeted, they sort of shut off the passing lanes to Pogba and Fred. So the centre-backs were forced to pass it to McTominay, and then he's not the best guy on the ball. So he either gave the ball away or had to play a safe pass back because the other passing options were blocked off. and that kept happening throughout the first half. So I thought a bit of the selection that Solskjaer did was wrong. I thought he should have played McTominay as a deeper midfielder rather than Fred. And yeah, Pogba obviously made the mistake and gave the penalty away. So it wasn't a catastrophic performance, because I honestly don't remember Arsenal sort of threatening the United goal too much, other than that penalty appeal. But at the same time, United didn't threaten Arsenal too much either. So it's just a case of one step forward, one step back for United at the moment. And this was just another example.
Dre, what was your take on the match?
Sorry. I think the last point that Harshal made was pretty important, just in terms of there wasn't really much threat from both sides. I think it was just a neutral game, an even game. Arsenal seemed more, comfortable and more confident in what they were doing. They moved the ball pretty well, and they advanced the ball pretty well. And then as they got to the final third, I think it slowed down a little bit in terms of trying to create chances at goal. But I think in the end, it's just, I think it's a mistake by Pogba. Just he shut off a little bit mentally there, and then ends up not tracking and gives away a penalty. And that's really all that needed to make the difference in the game. And Man U probably feel a little bit hard done by, but I think Arsenal, with the way that they played through the complete 90 minutes, I think they deserve to get 3 points from the game.
Harshal, there was a fair bit of talk in the analytics Twitterverse about the diamond versus kind of the width of Arsenal in the midfield. Were there any things that we could really take away, or do you feel that it was fairly stalemated, or what's your take on that?
No, that was an important factor in that game, because, as you said, I mean, when you play a diamond, you naturally give up width, because all your 4 midfielders are in the center.
Yeah.
And it's your fullbacks who are the guys who need to provide width. And Arsenal have played a hybrid system sort of almost all throughout the season, and even towards the end of last season, where it's a back 3 and a back 4, depending on what phase of play is going on. So because Kieran Tierney can slot in as the third centre back when needed, but he can then go out and play as the fullback with whoever's on the left side, whether it's Bukayo Saka or Ainsley Maitland-Niles playing as the wing back as required. So because they've got that flexibility, they can sort of move it around during the game, and they did that really well here, because they were able to get down the flanks and stretch United, which Leipzig didn't do. I mean, that was the key difference, I think, in between those two games. And also, I thought Thomas Partey was really good for Arsenal. He looks like a really good complete midfielder. And again, those who have seen him for Atletico over the last few years in La Liga will know that he's not a typical defensive midfielder. I mean, he's a really good passer of the ball.
Sure.
He can hold up play, and he did all of that. So Arsenal were able to dominate in midfield in that sense, but at the same time get down the flanks. And that's the problem with the diamond, that you end up giving up space on the flanks.
So, Dre, were there any outstanding players in particular on the attacking side that you'd give some high marks for?
I thought it was really encouraging to see Thomas Partey, and just he's known for his defensive, as Harshal said, but the way that he's able to pick passes forward and bring guys involved to the play, I really enjoy that. I mean, Aubameyang hadn't scored a Premier League goal in a while, so I'm happy to see him do that. I've always enjoyed watching Willian play. I think he's very creative and will help you create some stuff. So I think Arsenal's just starting to put it all together and finally starting to connect the pieces, and hopefully, they're still missing that little bit of creativity, I think, in the final third at times. So hopefully they're able to, get that part together. But I mean, for me, the outstanding part was Thomas in his debut.
Yeah, I think my take on the match is, frankly, it wasn't a very entertaining game to watch. And this often happens when you get the big six. And I keep wanting to believe that's not the case, but I am wrong again and again on it, where I have to believe that it is. I think the kind of the key takeaway that I would get from that is that Arsenal had 48 goals scored against them last year, which would put them around 8th or 9th, which is unsurprising since they finished 8th. And whatever they've done this season, they're at a season leading 7 goals scored against them. And that's a pretty dramatic improvement. And, I think I must admit I've seen their attacking or their starting defensive line at the beginning of the season. I thought, oh, we're going to get more of the same. But I just think that as players, both new players as well as folks that have been around for a little bit are being given their opportunities. It's just really nice to see that piece. So I kind of see that the Arteta plan coming together. I kind of, if I blur my eyes a little bit or squint, I sort of kind of see that happening at Manchester United. In defense of Ole, his record right now at Manchester United is more or less comparable to Klopp's first 100 games at Liverpool. Man U has spent twice as much money in that time period, but I think that has more to do with the inflation of players more than anything. So, I'm still not ready to join the naysayers of Arteta and Ole, just because we're 7 games into it. And Aubameyang, once he gets back to form, I think the engine really starts to rev up. I really like seeing some what Lacazette was able to do. I think he had some really nice individual play, which I'm hoping that he reminds Arteta that he's relevant in Arteta's scheme. So I guess those are what my reflections. Harshal, any more thoughts on that?
Just a couple of sort of analytics focused things, if you like. I mean, you said that Arsenal are leading the league in terms of goals conceded. They've conceded 7, but if you look at expected goals before the weekend, I don't have stats up for this weekend, but if you look at expected goals conceded for up to this weekend's games, they were, I think, 6th worst. They conceded an XG total of about 1.2 goals per game, whereas they'd actually conceded 1.17 goals a game. So they're outperforming XG by a little bit in terms of expected goals, but not by too much. It's just that some of the other teams are actually doing a lot worse in terms of even Man United, for example. They've conceded 1.6 goals per game, and that's again before this weekend, whereas in terms of XG, they're actually at 1.28. One of the biggest examples of that is Brighton. Brighton have conceded 0.6 XG per 90 this season, and they've actually conceded more than twice the number of goals. They've conceded 1.33 goals per game, and that's before this weekend's loss to Spurs. So, I mean, Arsenal have got a lot right in terms of how they've gone about the season and how they're building under Arteta, but I think their defense still can be got at. Gabriel is a really good buy. He's done really well. But I think the rest of the defense is still a bit of a mess. Arteta still doesn't know who he wants to play. He's had a lot of injuries, even though they have like 7 or 8 centre backs. I think 4 of them are out injured right now or something like that. So that side of things is still a little bit up in the air for me, for Arsenal at least.
I agree with you. I think the most interesting statistic that I heard over the weekend is that Liverpool is leading the league with most goals given up. I think the number's around 17 or so. 15. And they're also number 1 in the league. Go figure. But I guess you get 7 goals scored on you in one game. It can really skew the stats. Yeah. Well, good. Well, why don't we go ahead and start turning our attention to some of the other matches? Manchester United won 1-0 fairly comfortably.
I think you mean Man City there.
I'm sorry, Man City, not to be confused with their cross-time rivals. Dre, any thoughts about them and how they're getting along even without some key players?
Yeah, over the years, we've seen Pep, have to adjust for different reasons, and he's always quite comfortable doing that. And I think this is just another time. I mean, I think they've been through patches like this before where they've had to play without both Aguero and Jesus, and they find a way to manage. And I think that's just, another case of it. Obviously, they're not going to be as clinical, and they're not going to have that same kind of striker's instinct in front of the goal. But I mean, they're going to still continue to play the way that they play and create chances. And they granted it's only 1-0. They're happy with 3 points again, and they're going to keep moving forward.
Harshal, do you think that they're going to go after another striker given these sort of injuries? Though it seems like both are due back within the next 7 or 8 days.
I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, not in January, because it's very difficult to get value in January. They might do that next year, because I don't think Aguero's renewed his contract yet, and it's up at the end of this season. So, I mean, they might just need to go in to replace Aguero, if nothing else. But yeah, obviously, any team which misses out on Aguero and Jesus will suffer, and they have. But it's also interesting to see, again, if you look at some of the deeper numbers and analytics stuff, City are, 10th, I think, or so in the league for expected goals which they've created. So they're creating at, or they're running at an XG of about 1.1 per 90. And this is obviously, again, before this weekend's games. They've actually outscored that. They've scored 1.4 goals a game. So they're not really creating too much, but they're outscoring that. And that, again, is down to maybe a few long-range shots going in, which have low XG value. So what I think Pep will be concerned about is the fact that, I mean, they're not creating the chances. It's one thing to create the chances and then you don't have your Aguero or your Jesus to take those chances. That I can understand. But at this moment in time, it's the creativity that's missing, which you normally associate with a Pep Guardiola team. And that's, I think, what will be worrying for Pep.
I got you. Well, let's turn our attention to what were then league leaders, Everton. Everton had a banana slip with Newcastle, but if you really understood what the injury report was for Everton, in some ways it wasn't a terrible surprise given the number of injuries and suspensions. Do you want to help us unpack that, Harshal?
Yeah, obviously they didn't have Richarlison, they didn't have Lucas Digne at left back. James was out of this game, and Ancelotti chose to drop Jordan Pickford for this game and bring in Robin Olsen, who is on loan from Roma at Everton this season, in goal. So they did have, obviously, and again, captain and right back Seamus Coleman was unavailable as well. So yeah, a lot of key absentees who will make any team weak again. But I thought I really didn't understand the team that Ancelotti put out at the weekend, because he had, I think, 5 central midfielders who started the game and Dominic Calvert-Lewin up front. So you had, I think it was Doucouré, Gomez, Sigurdsson, Allen, and I'm forgetting someone, and Fabian Delph. All 5 of them, all 5 of them started in midfield. So, and it was quite predictable in terms of what panned out, because they had absolutely no width. It was the fullbacks who had to keep pushing on, provide width. But all the other guys are just playing in the center, and there's nobody making runs beyond Calvert-Lewin or supporting him as well. Because again, the central midfielders, it's not their natural tendency to do that. So it was just, they were just crowded out very easily. And yes, Calvert-Lewin did score, and they did try, and I mean, it did get close for a while, but then they conceded again. So I thought Ancelotti sort of shot himself in the foot a little bit with that selection. He has the players. I mean, he has Alex Iwobi, he has Bernard, he has a youngster called Anthony Gordon, who's a winger who he could have started instead. So, I mean, their sort of high-flying start that they had has come down to earth a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about the next few weeks.
Interesting. Dre, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I don't think anybody really expected for Everton to continue on the path they were on. I think they were always going to come down at some point. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things, and obviously Ancelotti spoke out and said that, Pickford will start the next game, but I think that's huge because, I mean, especially in this day and age, goalkeepers don't really rest like that. I mean, it's usually you'll have a goalkeeper for, the league per se, and then when you have a few League Cup games or whatever, you'll switch them out. So I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on and kind of watch out for. We've seen Pickford make a few mistakes already this season, and I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if he was replaced permanently coming up shortly.
Interesting. Well, I think I think Ancelotti's probably going to keep his word, and Pickford's going to play. My sense is, as emotional as Pickford plays, he could have an outstanding game against Man United. But I must say I am absolutely marvel at his distribution. Like, he is just, for as questionable he is at times at his decision making, the polar opposite is his ability to distribute. And I think that's why Ancelotti really wants him to hang in there and hope that somehow he gets a little more mature in his decision making. But time will tell on that. So let's turn our attention to some of the other league leaders. Aston Villa. They had a really surprising first half against Southampton. I don't know if we need to go into all the details, but Harshal, kind of give us the high notes of that match.
Yeah, Southampton sort of screamed into a 4-0 lead sort of midway through the second half. They'd scored 3 goals in the first half. 2 fantastic free kicks by James Ward-Prowse, who's, for guys who've not seen him take a free kick, he reminds me of David Beckham in terms of the whip and the ability he has to get the ball up over the wall and back down again, while also being able to curl it and get that whip. So he's become a really good set piece specialist. He scored 2 direct free kicks and got an assist from a corner, from which I think it was Yannick Vestergaard who scored the first goal for Southampton. So that sort of, I'll be honest, I sort of switched off the game at 4-0 because I was like, yeah, this is done and dusted. And then I come back and see that Villa put up a fight, scored 3 goals, although 2 of them came in stoppage time. I think Jack Grealish scored the 3rd goal in the 97th minute. So it was quite a fight back, and obviously wasn't enough. But I think what this shows is that, Villa do have a lot of fighting spirit that's been instilled in them. And I think that's a result of the fact that they came so close to relegation last year. But they're a tight-knit group under Dean Smith. He's done a good job there in terms of fostering that sort of spirit in the dressing room. And they've bought really well this summer as well. They've got some really good players in, which we've spoken about earlier. Ollie Watkins, brilliant championship-level striker who should do well in the Premier League. Matty Cash, another brilliant right-back championship-level young player who should do well once he sort of gets used to the Premier League. Bertrand Traore came in from a Champions League club in Olympique Lyon. Ross Barkley came in on loan from Chelsea. So they've got some good players in. Dean Smith has sort of put a good work culture in there, a good work ethic in there, and they're playing some good football as well. It's not just Jack Grealish carrying the load offensively. They've got a bunch of other players who can share that. So I don't expect Villa to be in the relegation places or in the relegation battle. They should be about mid-table or lower mid-table, in my opinion. And let's see how that goes on from, in the next few weeks.
Dre, any quick notes on the Tottenham-Brighton match?
Yeah, I thought obviously the big thing about that was the penalty. And when I think about a striker kind of backing into a center back, for example, on like a goal kick or something like that, usually when the center back's going up to challenge, he'll end up getting that free kick. So I thought it was interesting that it went the other way in this situation. But obviously, there's nothing you can do about that. And just Tottenham obviously are going to be happy to keep fighting and take 3 points out of it. And Brighton's going to feel a little bit hard done by, but I guess that's just part of the Premier League.
I got you. Good. Harshal, how about your take on the Liverpool-West Ham game? What's a quick notes on that?
West Ham have been really good in the last few weeks. They've had a lot of tough games, but they've come through all of them quite well. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect that from them. I didn't expect that David Moyes would be able to get that out of them. But that back five that they play with the midfield in front of that back five, which is really compact and denies any space between the lines and sort of forces teams to go out wide. They did that to Man City. They did that to Liverpool as well. Liverpool didn't really create too many chances. And I wouldn't say that the penalty was lucky. A lot of people on social media or even otherwise, on Match of the Day or whatever on the BBC have insinuated that Mohamed Salah dived. I don't think he dived. It was a clear penalty in terms of how Masuaku it was who tripped him. So it's not luck. Salah is such a dangerous player in the box that players, his gravity in that sense is such that players will get drawn to him and they will try to get the ball off him, which ends up, at times leading to such fouls. So Liverpool didn't get lucky, but it showed their bench strength as well because they were able to get Shaqiri and Jota on. Shaqiri played that pass through for Jota to score. Jota scored in 2 successive home games now for Liverpool. He's had an impact. The guy, he came in from Wolves and everybody thought that he would be on the bench and he would be sort of like an impact player. But he's had a much bigger impact than people would have thought. And Klopp himself has said this. He said this after the West Ham game that he's had a lot more of an impact than I thought he would. People had forgotten about Jordan Shaqiri, but he's shown that, he still has it in his locker to be able to pull out game-changing moments like that. And that showed the strength of the Liverpool bench. So even though, they don't have Van Dijk, they don't have Fabinho for a little while, it was, Nathaniel Phillips, who's a 23-year-old making his debut at centre-back, but he was man of the match. So again, Klopp is able to find solutions within his squad, and Liverpool are back on top of the table. So it was a difficult game. West Ham made it difficult, and I think they will make it difficult for a lot of teams if they keep playing this way. But Liverpool are finding a way to win, and that's I think that shows that they could probably still be the team to beat this year.
Right. Dre, any notes on that match?
Yeah, I honestly, I thought after watching the majority of the first half, I thought the game was there for West Ham to win. I think they actually, I wouldn't say it was lucky. I think it's just, I think Masuaku made a massive error in trying to even tackle to begin with Salah facing away from the goal. And he's between him and the goal. I don't see any reason for him to put in the tackle that he did. So I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot with that. And then, over the course of the second half, I think the quality just shone through, as Harshal said. Shaqiri, that's his second involvement in the week. He had another amazing reverse pass midweek in Champions League, a 1-2 with Alexander-Arnold that led to a goal. And this one almost got me out of my seat. I was really excited when I saw that pass. So over the course of the game, Liverpool's quality shone through, and they end up winning.
Well, they're back in their usual spot, which is top of the league, and time will tell. They're going to have a really challenging next week or two, playing against Man City, playing against Atalanta 2 times in the next month. So they're going to have their hands full. So we'll kind of see if they're still at the top of the league in the next week or two. All right. Well, with that, why don't we go ahead and transition to that Liverpool-Atalanta preview, which is on Tuesday, I believe. Harshal, help us unpack that.
This could be, again, a really exciting game because I'll put it this way. Atalanta are a lot like Leeds in the sense that they're a fresh attacking side. For fans of the Premier League who maybe haven't really seen too much of Atalanta over the last year or so, they're a really innovative attacking side, and a lot like Leeds where they push a lot of numbers forward. And that's led to, you just need to go and look at some of the scorelines that Atalanta games had from last season. And the number of times they've put 4, 5, 6 goals past teams, but at the same time, they've also conceded 2, 3, even 4 goals, in certain games. So you're always going to get a lot of attacking intent from Atalanta. And it's interesting if you watch them, they set up in a way where they look to create diamonds on both sides of the pitch. So it's only sort of this, they play a back 3. So it's only the central center half and the center forward who are sort of free in that sense. The other guys are always looking to set themselves up in diamonds towards the side of the pitch so they can play passing patterns and pull the ball, push the ball up the field and sort of progress the ball. So Liverpool will have their hands sort of full because Atalanta can definitely play past a high press. Even though Liverpool will press high, Atalanta have the quality and the positional rotation. I forget which game it was, but I think it was Atalanta's last game in the Champions League where there was a passage of play where the 2 central midfielders dropped in and became the centre halves, and the centre halves were up the field, and the goalkeeper had the ball and he played it out to the centre midfielders who are now playing as the centre backs. So that sort of positional rotation, which is again something similar to what Leeds do, Sheffield United do to an extent, is what you're going to see from Atalanta. So it'll be a fun game, I think. Liverpool obviously don't have Van Dijk, Fabinho. They're not going to have Nat Phillips as well, who, as I said, was man of the match because he's not part of the Champions League squad because they didn't expect that they'll need him. So I don't know who's going to play centre back unless Matip is fit, who's going to partner Joe Gomez. So that's going to be interesting to see who they put in there.
Right.
But yeah, it'll be an interesting, and I think it's going to be a really exciting game.
Dre, what's your take?
I'm expecting lots of goals in this one, to be honest. I think this has the potential to have a lot of counter-attacking play because both teams have such explosive attacking groups. And especially, with Liverpool struggling at the back in terms of who's going to play, I think we could, see a goal fest here. And I mean, we all want to see it, but yeah, I think this game has goals all over it.
Yeah, I think my take on it is that I think the Liverpool Ajax game had me really excited, and this goes to the next level. I just wonder if the results are going to be similar to the Ajax Liverpool game, which was wide open, but maybe not a lot of goals. One thing that's really fascinating is that, Liverpool leads the English Premier League in most goals conceded, and Atalanta is in the top 6 or 7 of most goals conceded in Serie A. So one could make the argument that both defenses are a bit suspect, but I think that simplifies things a bit too much. So that is going to be something that I'm going to keep an eye for, particularly Atalanta's defense, because we kind of I've seen Liverpool, it's one match, right? That's the anomaly, while Atalanta's been pretty consistently scored upon. I am struck by, in general, how teams, many of the teams in Champions League have done well during the week and have done poorly in their home leagues. And Liverpool is an exception to that. Man City, Man City is a perfect example of that. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out. But I imagine we can guarantee it's going to be open, whether it's going to be a goal fest or an Ajax Liverpool part 2. I guess time will tell. So let's turn our attention back to the upcoming Premier League matches. There's going to be a couple of big games, one of which is Man United-Everton. Harshal, what are the matchups going to be like that? And any hope for some of the Everton fans in terms of players coming back?
I think James is going to be fit. I think, if I remember correctly, Richarlison's ban should be done, so I think he'll return. I could be mistaken because, they had Richarlison and Luca Digne sent off in successive games, so I don't remember exactly who got sent off when. But I think one of the two, either Luca Digne or Richarlison, should be available for that game. James definitely should be back. So that should obviously bolster their chances. From a United point of view, Anthony Martial will be back domestically. So again, I expect to see him play. And it's a curious thing that United still haven't won a game at home in the league this season. They've not won. I think going back to the end of last season, it's now 7 home league games where they haven't won a game at home, which is a stunning stat. They've lost 3 games at home this season already to Crystal Palace, Spurs, and now Arsenal. So this obviously is away from home. So I'm hoping that I'm not sure what the issue is as such, but it could be a game where United might just have a bit of an edge, especially if Everton don't get their, all or most of those guys who are out back. If they do, then it could be a much closer game, I think.
Dre, what's your take on that matchup?
I think we're looking at, 2 teams who are looking to turn things around. Everton's lost the last 2, I believe. Man U obviously just lost to Arsenal, so that they're both going to be looking to kind of bounce back from that. I think the middle of the field is going to be really important. Man U's obviously experimented with the diamond in the middle, trying to fit certain players in, and obviously Everton's midfield I think is their strongest part this year. So I think the middle of the field is going to be very interesting. I think whoever wins that is probably going to go on to win the game. I hope Everton wins, but I'm not going to speak too much on that.
What? Give me a score prediction.
Honestly, I'd guess maybe 2-1 Everton.
Okay. How about yourself, Harshal?
I'd go 2-1 the other way to United.
Okay. I'm going to side with Harshal, 2-1 Man United, largely because Rodriguez is iffy on playing and Gomez is also iffy on playing. I just wonder if they're going to be able to really contribute. And with Richarlison out and Digne out, I just wonder if the cupboard's a little bit too threadbare for the quality of Man United. So let's go ahead and turn our attention to the next game of note is going to be the Man City-Liverpool game. Harshal, what's your take on that?
I think the big thing here is if Sergio Aguero is going to be available or not, because based on whatever news reports have come out, and not news reports exactly, I mean what Pep said in his last press conference, that Aguero could be fit for the game against Liverpool. And if he comes in, obviously he may not be completely match fit, but he did play 2 or 3 games before getting injured again. So it might not be a case of him being completely rusty. And obviously, if Aguero adds a completely different dimension to the attack, and it'll allow Raheem Sterling to go back to the left where he's most comfortable. You know, he's been playing as a striker when they haven't had Aguero and Jesus. So that again allows other players to play in more natural positions. So it'll, again, City and Liverpool, I think their games over the last couple of seasons have been extremely entertaining, both teams going at it. And I expect to see more of the same. So, although, I mean, again, it depends on Liverpool and how much is taken out of them by the midweek game against Atalanta, and whether they're able to get those same levels of energy up against Liverpool. Because I don't think Klopp will be able to rotate as he did in the midweek. You know, he rested Salah, Mane and Firmino in that game. He took Henderson off at halftime and brought Wijnaldum on at halftime in the midweek Champions League game against Midtjylland. I don't think he can do that against Atalanta. So it could come down a little bit to energy. But other than that, tactically, I'm not saying anything about what Pep could come up with, because he surprised everyone a few times already this season. So we know what Liverpool are going to line up like. I don't know what City are going to do, to be very honest. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting and open game.
How about you, Dre?
Yeah, if I've learned anything over the last 2 seasons with this matchup, it's impossible to predict. You don't really know what's going to happen. So I think the only hope is that it's just an entertaining game. Hopefully, you get Aguero back, so to add to that Man City team. When you look midweek, as Harshal said, Liverpool's probably got a tougher, well, not probably, they have a tougher matchup. Man City's at home to Olympiacos. So you'd imagine they might be able to get, a little bit more rest from that going into the weekend. But I mean, the hope is that it's just an entertaining, kind of free-flowing game both ways, and kind of just see what happens.
What's a
no
score
prediction from me?
You got.
I knew you were going to ask that. I think maybe Liverpool wins this one.
What's the score?
Maybe 2-0.
2-0. How about you, Harshal?
I really don't know. I genuinely do not know. I mean, if I had to just put out a score, top of my head says 2-1 to City, and that's just because of how Liverpool don't have like Van Dijk and Fabinho. But I mean, with this game, as Jay said, you really can't tell with this game.
Yeah, my gut tells me 3-1 Liverpool, just because I really feel like Man City desperately needs their strikers. I think they're good for 1 or 2 goals with their current configuration. But this may be one of those where top 6 team plays top 6 and they neutralize each other, and hopefully it's not a 0-0 affair. So I'll say 3-1 Liverpool or 0-0 would be my second most probable outcome. Any other thoughts, Harshal, in terms of games to cover, in terms of previewing for next weekend, or those seem to be the ones that immediately come to mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, Chelsea have a relatively easy game to play against Sheffield United, and that's it's a big change from last season, where obviously Sheffield United were the surprise of the season last year, and they were a really difficult team to play against. They've not had that this season, and I think they're in serious trouble now. 6-7 games in, they're still struggling to pick up a win. So Chelsea should win that quite easily. But what I found interesting from Chelsea over the midweek game in the Champions League and this game was that Lampard has moved away from a 4-2-3-1. He's gone to a 4-3-3. And I think that's the formation that actually suits these Chelsea players a lot more than the 4-2-3-1 he was trying. And they played Burnley at the weekend. They won 3-0. But if you saw the team, that was a really attack-minded team. Reece James started at right back. N'Golo Kante was the sole sort of defensive holding midfielder, because you had Mason Mount and Kai Havertz playing as the 2 center midfielders. And then you had Timo Werner, Tammy Abraham and Hakim Ziyech playing up top as the front 3. Pulisic was going to start, but he got injured in the warm-up, so Werner came in on the left instead. But that's a really attacking lineup. And I'm not saying that. I mean, he could potentially play the same team against Sheffield United. They do have a tough game against Rennes in the Champions League in the weekend, but he's got the numbers and he's got the players now to rotate. But it was interesting for me to see that sort of Lampard moved away from the 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3, and that's worked in the last two games. In obviously one being in the Champions League and then in the weekend at the Premier League. So let's see if he keeps sticks with that, because it seems to be working.
Trey, let me ask you a question. It seems like Pulisic has been injured quite a bit when at Chelsea. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, and even the types of injuries he's getting? I mean, is this just a bad spell, or is this? I hate to use the term injury prone, but what are your take on Pulisic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could just be a bad spell. I mean, I think often we see, like, when players do get injured, depending on the type of injury, obviously, most of the time it's like muscle injuries, they tend to be a little more susceptible to other kind of injuries shortly after. So, I think it's just unfortunate. I think, obviously we want to see him back healthy and see him back playing again. And it may take a little bit more management, a little bit, may have to hold off an extra week or so that when he comes back, to just kind of make sure everything's 100%. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't chalk it up to anything other than maybe just a bad spell.
Well, let's hope you're right. As you know well, sometimes you're out for a week or two, and then all of a sudden that spot you thought you had is a lot trickier than what you thought you had. Speaking of which, last time we chatted, we talked about the evolution of the center attacking midfielder. I thought we could maybe explore a little bit more on just of the big six center attacking midfielders that remain, right? Or help us unpack the key players in that role and kind of how they're playing a little bit differently.
Yeah, well, to start, I mean, after our last discussion, actually, I saw James Rodriguez kind of made a video where he was talking about the number 10 position and how when he was younger, everybody wanted to play there. And that was, the prized position. And now nobody wants to play it because most managers kind of leave out a number 10 in their system, or, it just doesn't exist in the same way. So when you look across the top six, I think they're all different types of number 10s, if you will, and just in terms of how they've adapted. So you've got Ozil, for example, who is, I think, the classic number 10, and he's not playing. You have a guy like De Bruyne who's adapted a little bit and can play more withdrawn as a number 8. You have a player like James who's now playing out wide and kind of finding his spots. And then, with Manu, for example, there's still Bruno Fernandes who's actually playing in a number 10 role. So the position is kind of faded off a little bit, but players have to adapt. And I think we see all different types of players, adapting in different ways, and some for the better, some for the worse.
How do you see the way you play the position adapt, or what are there additional skills one needs to think about more, or different ways of angles of attack? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think I've kind of become more of a withdrawn player in terms of like more of a number 8 role. I've been able to kind of, adjust my game towards that, and I've had help doing that. And I think it just kind of depends on your skill set. I mean, for me, I'm stronger with my range of passing than, for example, with dribbling. And I think players who are more dribbling number 10s will kind of end up out wide or further forward. And those who are more likely to pick a pass will kind of be a little more withdrawn. So it just kind of, you have to assess what's going on, assess your game, your physique, everything, and just kind of understand what adjustments you need to make and where else you can play on the field.
Beautiful. Harshal, any thoughts on the evolution and how people are moving to these altered positions?
Yeah, just sort of agree with what Dre is saying, in terms of if you're looking at the top 6, very different types of number 10s. Dele Alli, for example, another one at Spurs who's barely playing. And that's, again, I think a function of the fact that Mourinho doesn't really have a number 10 in the system he plays. It's if he's playing a 4-3-3. So and we spoke about this last time as well. It's just that the way the game has evolved, that you can't really have a passenger on the team in the sense from a defensive point of view. So if you are playing a number 10, he needs to be able to contribute off the ball as well, which is what, for example, Fernandes does that a lot for United. He does sort of lead the press for United. And I think that's not where his primary impact is. His primary impact is with the ball at his feet, but you need to be able to do that. And with regard to Ozil, for example, he's always been characterized as a lazy player who didn't run around, and that's not entirely true. He did do his bit defensively in terms of positioning and cutting off passing lanes and all of that, but he's obviously not the most aggressive presser. And we saw at the weekend as well, it was Willian, for example, who was playing more of a central role for Arsenal, and he was really helping the Arsenal press in terms of shutting down United. You saw Lacazette. I mean, he didn't really have an impact on the ball, but I thought off the ball, he did a fantastic job cutting off Fred, which is why United had to keep going to McTominay. So, I mean, that's just an example of how in central areas of the pitch, you can't really have someone who, isn't a good player defensively. And I think it just adds then the fact that you need to put in so much mental and physical effort on the defensive side of things leaves you, I mean, I wouldn't say exhausted, but then there's a lot less you can do when you do have the ball at your feet, because you've expended a lot of mental and physical energy, doing the defensive side of things. So that's why that traditional number 10 has died out. And it's a shame because some of those players, I mean, I grew up watching Zidane, for example. He's a classic number 10. But you're not going to get a player like Zidane, especially if this is how academies are also going to teach young kids to play. That, I mean, this is the role and these are the things you need to do off the ball and all of that. You're not going to get someone like Zidane or Juan Roman Riquelme, for example, another guy who played in La Liga, played for Barcelona, played in Argentina, sort of revered as the number 10 in Argentina. So even Ozil, Ozil is like that last sort of typical number 10, and he's not getting a game at Arsenal anytime soon because he's not on either squad. So that's just the way the game has evolved now. I think those guys are going to have to move out wide or play deeper, as Dre said, based on their skill set.
Beautiful. Well, why don't we leave it there, gentlemen? Thank you so much. We are sponsored by the EPL Prospectus, a 280-page guide created by a team of 25-plus writers and designers. Moneyball for football, analytics plus opposition analysis plus eye candy. Available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Join us for our next Football Thinking Fans podcast. For now, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.